Hello everyone, Max here with Fiction Rant to give you a sales pitch for a game that isn't paying me and whose parent company doesn't even really exist anymore. I'm talking about one of my favorite games from my childhood and adulthood alike, Descent. Descent was released way back in 1995 and is essentially a Doom clone, with the player being thrown into missions solo with a huge arsenal as they navigate a 3D map. What they did that was different though is that in this game, you're not just some dude with guns, you're piloting a spaceship, the phenomenal Pyro GX, in a zero-G environment, so if you don't move, you float. But if you do start moving, you can move up, down, left, right, forward, backward, and have pitch control. True freedom of movement, unlike anything I've ever seen in modern titles. Combine that with an absurd collection of energy and projectile weapons of varying levels of usefulness, shields, power-ups, a ton of unique robots to smash, and a cult classic was born. The game even has multiplayer, and the matches were just mind-bending and kind of nauseating as you're pulling crazy maneuvers while trying to destroy your opponents who are doing the same thing. And all of this is being done in a combination of these really tight claustrophobic corridors and rooms and secret doors and all that great stuff that they used to have back in the day. For the excellent campaign, the story through line was that you're being sent into various mines and facilities across the solar system to basically condemn and destroy them because a virus has infected all the mining robots, making them super aggressive and attacking everybody. Each level, you'd have to collect a blue, yellow, and red key in order to access higher tier rooms, eventually accessing the boss or reactor room. And once you've destroyed it, a self-destruct sequence has been activated, and you get about a minute to find an exit to be able to get out before the whole facility blows up. Along the way, you're encouraged to rescue imprisoned mine personnel, though all that doing that gives you is score, which doesn't actually affect anything aside from bragging rights, so it's not that big of a deal either way. Descent never made waves like Doom or Quake, probably in part due to how difficult it was to get a handle on the controls, but it did manage to get a couple sequels. Descent 2 was more of the same, and feels like the first game, but just more weapons and enemies and more variety in locations. It also introduced a guide bot who could help you navigate the labyrinthian maps, and would helpfully aggro enemies for you and get in the way, and then, put little chat messages of, please don't hurt me. The guide bot was often more of a liability than a help. Descent 3 was a update to more modern graphics and was much more streamlined and story-driven with more of an emphasis on, here's the odd cutscene and here's some puzzles that are a little more interesting. Those which weren't really a thing in Descent 1 and 2. Like, they had secret doors and they had the blue, yellow, and red keys, but that's not really a puzzle, that's just progression. Descent 3 also improved the guide bot by allowing you to deploy or recall the little beastie so it doesn't get you in the way all the time and doesn't get you killed. There was also Descent Free Space, which is more of a spin-off title, which was a significant departure from the gameplay and environment of the earlier games, and to me was pretty forgettable since it didn't even play the same way as the rest of the series. Like, you would throttle up and then just leave it there, and you would coast at that speed, and it was in outer space instead of these mines, and you couldn't, strafe and move directly up and down, that kind of thing. It was more like a standard flight sim. It just didn't... It wasn't Descent to me. The main campaign for each game was plenty challenging, but the real challenge came from multiplayer. Even my dad played this game, and he was a tactician about it, and would make good use of what probably was his favorite weapon in Descent 2 called smart mines, which when detonated would release a small cloud of homing projectiles to chase down a nearby target. So one of his favorite tactics was to place a few of these just out of sight near a door and then lie in wait beyond that door for an unsuspecting victim to come through. He'd then fire one shot at his cluster of mines, detonating all of them, and then start attacking them from the front. So his victim gets met with this barrage of fire from the front while being hammered from behind by a bunch of mines. You could do fun stuff like that. My personal favorite experience was I was playing 1 versus 1 against my brother on Descent 3, and this particular map we were playing was basically just a giant collection of huge open cubes that were connected by small doors in the center of each cube face with smaller rooms and stuff off to the sides, with all the goodies and weapons that you can collect. I got together a few weapons, including a missile called a Black Shark, which you'd shoot it at a wall and it would create this mini black hole effect that would suck in everything nearby. I then sat in the middle of one of those cubes, watching the little engine lights of my brother's ship moving back and forth, picking up goodies. I then managed to tag him with my black shark and just followed up with a bunch of lasers and missile fire, all the while hearing my brother going, "Ah!" from across the house. It was glorious. Plus, when you died, you dropped all your goodies, so I got to go over there and collect all the things that he'd been consolidating for me. And, of course, the ultimate insult kill was available, was where you could peck someone to death with flares. Flares were meant as just shoot this against a wall, it sticks there, and it glows to help you be able to see better. But they also did 1 shield damage. You started with 100, and you could accumulate up to 200 shields. These would do 1. So if you managed to kill somebody with this, it was not only incredibly insulting because you had to hit them up to 200 times with flares, but it was also really, really frustrating for the person that you're doing this to because all those flares are sticking to their ship. So progressively more and more and more, their entire screen is getting covered in these glowing motes of light that don't go away. So eventually, they're totally blind and just kind of bumbling around blind until the player who'd outflown them so completely thoroughly just, pecked the way, kept pecking, and eventually you'd get blown up, but it took forever. And meanwhile, there was, you became blind pretty quickly, and it was just, such an insult. One of the other standout features of particularly the first game to me was the soundtrack. It's from the 8-bit era, but dang! When they put together that music, they went hard. Like, it was just the developers. They didn't hire a studio or, some orchestra or whatever to create the music. They just created it using like a MIDI player, using synthesized sounds, and it is fantastic. You can find the whole soundtrack on YouTube these days. I'll link it in the description. I've personally been known to use it as just background music while doing other stuff because it's just that good. Unfortunately, these days, it's relatively difficult to play Descent. You can buy them all on Steam, but none of them are remastered or anything, and they're just the original DOS versions of the game, which, because of the sloppy code and workarounds that were so common back then, it's basically unplayable without mods. Like, it'll run, but apparently all the movements were tied directly to processor clock speed or something, so the gentle kind of bobbing in place from back in the day is replaced by this frenetic bouncing up and down, and all the robots get access to an ample supply of cocaine, letting them fire and move just insanely fast as they're bouncing all around. Yet, fortunately, there's a community of fans out there who have made mods which make everything perform much better on modern hardware. There's also a spiritual successor called Overdrive, which was designed by, I think, some of the original developers with modern hardware in mind, and while my nostalgia goggles won't let me say that it's better than the originals, I'd say it's a worthy sequel, and it absolutely captures the feel of the original games. It doesn't even change all that much mechanics-wise from the original, it just adds a couple enemies which are just plain unfair. Like, all the enemies from Overdrive are new compared to Descent, but with Descent, the enemies, I don't feel like they were actually all that unfair. Like, there was kind of a notorious enemy that their projectiles didn't have any travel time, so as soon as you got hit by them, you just took damage. But they also weren't durable, so if you snuck up on them and they weren't aware of you, you could take them out before they could hit you. Difficult but fair kind of thing. These are basically just a shield tax. They fired these scattered projectiles, which are pretty difficult to dodge on their own, but they would then also teleport directly behind you when engaged, so there's nothing you could do. You just couldn't dodge them. I mean, it's possible that I just missed something about how to counter them, but when I played through, it just seemed kind of unfair. They were also fairly durable, so it's not like you could sneak up on them and one-shot them or anything like that, so it's like, okay, great. I shot at this thing, it targeted me, teleported directly behind me, and I took 15 shields worth of damage because it just pelted me. Thanks. But really, though, that's my one complaint about the game. The rest was super solid. But yeah, check out Descent. I'll link a few useful websites in the description, including where to download the mods to make the first couple games actually, work, and the playlist of the first game's soundtrack because it's amazing and more people need to hear it. And until next time, live long and prosper, and may the Force be with you.